You're on the platform, and joining us is Wayne Junior Pearce, absolute legend. 16 Origins he played in, 19 tests for the Kangaroos, and coached the Blues 99-0001, and in 2000 led New South Wales to a 3-0 sweep over Queensland. Thank you so much, Wayne, for joining us again. The changes that have been made, and there has been more than a few by Brad Fittler and his selectors. What's that saying? Is that an admission that they got the first one wrong?
Yeah, well, I think it's certainly an acknowledgement that the team didn't click in the first one, without a doubt. But having said that, the margin wasn't great. But when you look at the match, you got to say Queensland deserved to win. You know, it wasn't as though New South Wales got pipped in the end. You know, they were comprehensively beaten. And I think the scoreline sort of hid the fact that there was a decent margin between the two sides. So Brad's gone for some changes, and you know, a couple of changes in the forwards, a couple of changes out wide, and you know, the challenge when you make a number of changes such as this, though, in a state of origin, is that you've only got effectively 6 days by the time the players settle in camp before the match. So it's not a long time to get cohesion amongst the players. So it's going to be a pretty stiff challenge over there in Perth, but you know, we've certainly got the talent to do it. It's a matter of whether or not Brad can bring the players together quickly enough.
Wayne, is that a sign of panic at all? I mean, I don't want to over-exaggerate this, but you know, making that many changes and in a must-win match, I mean, it certainly sort of might appear like that.
I don't think it's. I don't think it's panic. I think it's a pretty gutsy call to make that volume of changes. But he has confidence in the players, and I think you've got to give credit to Queensland. Though in that first game, they actually played very well, and they had a good game plan to take out and shut down the key playmaker, which was Nathan Cleary. They put pressure on him. They gave him no room to move with his kicking game. And that meant that Queensland had pretty good field position for most of the match. So, from the point of view of Queensland, I mean, you've got to give them credit. You know, they did play very, very well. And yeah, I think New South Wales can bounce back. And even it's neutral territory. It's not as though they're playing at home. The biggest challenge, if we can win over them, Perth, will be the third game. We'll worry about that when we get to that, because that'll be on home turf up in Queensland. But it's an interesting matchup.
Balmain, Origin and Kangaroo legend Junior Pearce is with us on the platform. When you talk about a decent margin between the two sides, why was that? Were Queensland just a better side or better players, or do they just play better on the night, more kind of cohesively on the night?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, the way I read the game was that, you know, they had more mobility in their pack. I thought that was where we really struggled, and we, as a consequence of them being more mobile, quicker off the ground, quicker in the play the balls, we just didn't have the go forward that was required in a state of origin match. So yeah, there was we had a lot of strike power, but didn't get the opportunity to really unleash that strike power in good field position because of the very mobile Queensland pack.
Playing in Perth, talk us through that. There's a couple of aspects to this, Wayne. One of them, you know, obviously that they want to spread the game and get this Origin series all over Australia. But, you know, part of me also sort of thinks, hang on a second, you've had COVID for a couple of years or 2 or 3 years now. Why don't you reward the loyal fans? Why don't you keep it where actually, you know, your staunch fan base is, and rather than, you know, get them to have to pay to fly all the way over there? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, the policy has been for the last, maybe 6 years now, that the third game is a neutral venue. Prior to that, there was each year you rotate two in Queensland, 2 in New South Wales, and I agree with that policy. I think it's good. I think you got to grow the game. I think we've got to take the game to new territories. Most people who watch State of Origin aren't at the ground; they're actually on television. So yeah, and the fact is, you know, there's some origins of, if it's a dead rubber and a dead rubber in Sydney, we struggle to fill it.
Right.
So it's I think it's a good policy, and I certainly support it.
Why is it such a big deal still in Australia, and why is it an even bigger deal for the players? We've got Test Match League this weekend, Kiwis versus Mate Ma'a Tongans, and I'm going to ask you about that, but the Origin still seems to be number one for Australia and Australian players. Why is that?
Well, it's got this intensity around it that's built up over the 40 plus years that it's been running, where it's the history of it goes back to the hatred between New South Wales and Queensland, which is a bit of a sort of a myth nowadays, but that cult following is sort of still there, and the intensity of the matches are just phenomenal. I mean, you've got play, and one of the reasons why the intensity is there, which is not there necessarily week in, week out at club level, is not just the quality of the players, it's the fact that they've got this week in camp where they've got no other focus other than just this game, and there's massive publicity around it, a lot of pressure. In fact, the players that haven't played Origin, that have aspirations in their minds, secretly they'll have, because they see how intense it is, they see the pressure. All players have got, until they test themselves, have got a little bit of a doubt as to whether they can step up, because it's a bit like the Olympics, where it's not happening. The World Championships happen every year. That's like your club footy happening every week, but Origin happens during that 3 matches a year, and there's a lot of pressure. You've got to step up in that cauldron, and it's just a faster game, and it's generally quite spectacular.
Wayne Junior Pearce is with us on the platform. We're talking about Origin, the game in Perth, which is rubber number 2 this coming Sunday. How's it changed since you've played? And I'm just talking about the pace, the intensity, the expectations, all of that. Or do you actually think it's pretty similar in those ways?
No, I think the game itself is faster, definitely faster, because the players now are full-time professionals. When I played, you were part-time professional, you had another job because the income wasn't there like it is now, the salaries weren't there. But the game's faster. It's a game that's, you've got, the athleticism's probably better than what it was then. But there's probably not as much of the skill in terms of the short passing, the offloads, that sort of stuff. I think that there was a better, because there was now the focus is on power, it's on speed, but I think the skill aspect was probably a little bit better back in the old era. But now the game overall, if you ask me, I really love watching the game now. So I think the game is a better product now, personally, and I played back then, but it's different, just different, yeah.
I was watching a bit of Matty Johns the other night, and they showed some sort of clips, various clips from I think the 80s it was, and you look at the game then, and what the players, what you're allowed to get away with, just in terms of the head contact, the way, the kind of tackle techniques and stuff like that. Do you look back now, and does it really concern you what you put yourself through and what some of your other blokes put yourself through, especially those who are playing front row in there? I mean, your head was just basically on the chopping block.
Yeah, times have changed in a number of ways, haven't they? I mean, and when you talk about times changing, I remember back in the 80s, you used to go to the beach and no hat, no suntan, like 70s and 80s. That was that's just what you did, and then the awareness wasn't around, and it's in a whole lot of aspects of life. We've become a lot wiser, and in certainly in the collision sports right around the world, we've become much smarter in the way that we adjudicate on play and try minimising head contact, because there's definitely some issues that can occur with repeated knocks. So I got plenty of knocks back then, head knocks. I'm still okay at the moment, so I hope that continues.
Well, yeah, you sound absolutely compass mentis, mate. Look, Wayne, just hold the line a second. You're listening to Junior Pearce on the platform, open, tolerant and free. Martin Devlin, Lachlan War, doing sport.